What is up, everybody? Happy Sunday. How are we all doing? Welcome to the Sunday Open with Nick4aTick. I am Nick. It's good to have everybody here. I hope everyone has had a fantastic weekend. I don't know about you guys. I had a near perfect weather here in North Texas, so no complaints from my end. How did everyone handle this past week in the markets? It's been a bit wild. I don't know about you guys. I didn't necessarily struggle, but I didn't think the market would just start rebounding the way it has off the, the retest of the good time to buy candle. And we've just kind of been up, and away. I believe we even had, what was it? Did we officially have 9 straight green days or 8 straight green days? Something that hasn't happened in about 20 years. So pretty crazy, pretty wild. Yeah, hard to trade that. I felt like we even even when there was weakness in the early part of the week, I think it was Tuesday, had that like big sell-off off the open, and we maybe it was Wednesday, I believe it was this lovely candle here. And then, we pretty much just bid right off it, and you basically just had to get long at any time, and you pretty much had an awesome week. But as everyone is trickling in here, quick reminder, if you have not tuned in on Sundays before, you missed last week's first show. This is not necessarily a trading hour. This is an hour session that we basically take a good picture of what happened last week, what may happen this week, where we may go, some key levels that at least I'm looking for. We'll talk about a rough plan for the big four. So NQES, CL, and GC, as well as taking a look at what is on the docket as far as economic releases, the economic calendar, what's basically going to keep us on our toes this week. If you're not prepared for some of those events in the pre-market or those random bond auctions that happen. So we talk about those, so you guys having a rough idea of what's happening each day, as well as even taking a deeper dive into some of the key earnings releases that are coming out this week as well. But I guess the biggest elephant in the room is none of those economic events besides one may even matter going into this week. And it may just be, I don't know what you want to call it, but it is one of my least favorite trading weeks in history, or at least for my last few years of trading. When the market's like the way it is, or we're in a weird economic cycle like we kind of are, FOMC week, it just happens to be one of my least favorite trading weeks out there. There are obviously plenty of opportunities. There's a lot of good trades to be had for day traders, but it's also a great week that can get you in a lot of trouble if you're not careful, if you don't use stops, if you size up too much, if you're not in a very greedy kind of see profit, take profit type of mindset, you can get yourself in trouble. So a lot of the time during these, we kind of have a balanced and choppy early start to the week, even heading into the actual FOMC itself. That early part of Wednesday can be somewhat lackluster, and then the fireworks start, and then Powell gets to his press conference. So it should be a lot of fun for us to actively trade it. I believe it's going to be Mr. XYZ himself and me trading it Wednesday in the afternoon. So if you're going to be trading or paying attention or in front of screens on Wednesday for FOMC, please do tune in. I'm sure that's going to be a lot of fun for us to sit and try to find maybe a trading opportunity or two. But before we get into the plan for the week, or at least how I'm looking at things in the early part of this week, as I said, for all of the products that we're going to go through here tonight, whatever plan you have in a week like this, I mean, it's very possible by Wednesday afternoon, the plan is irrelevant and you're looking for new areas that we may be trading in, because it's very possible we could completely leave last week's range and need to be looking at prices at higher levels, or we could be back in the pretty much majority of the volume from April. So that's one of the reasons FOMC, I tend to be a little light. I tend to just kind of stay away, see if there's any good opportunities, and then you come back as price settles, hopefully by Thursday or Friday. But sometimes we don't get the market's real reaction to the release and Powell's press conference till later, maybe even the following week. So we'll talk a little bit about it when we get to the economic calendar. But as we are coming about 10 minutes into the Sunday open here, what are everyone's thoughts? I think this may be a pretty lackluster open. Personally, there wasn't a lot of news. I think Trump had a pre-recorded interview that was released on NBC or something. He was talking a lot about China tariffs and, potentially looking to wind those down in time, but not unless China gives us an inch. So I don't know how much that may move the market here this evening in the early part of the Sunday open, but we'll see. So poll in the chat. Gap up, gap down, or are we going to open right around settlement from Friday? Would be the C, the C answer that's not currently there. But give me your thoughts. What do you guys think? How do you think we're going to open here on this Sunday? If I had to guess, I'm going to guess right around settlement. Not a whole lot of movement, but I've been wrong on several Sundays before with these opens, especially in the last few months. Sometimes they tend to be pretty wild. So I don't know how much chaos we may see in the early part of tonight's session, but that's why we're here, to enjoy it, watch it. Oh, hey, the King Streamer Boy is in the chat. Hey, Leo, how's it going? Happy Sunday. So let's talk a little bit about last week. As I said, we had that violent day on Wednesday, but for the most part, I feel like the market was just kind of consolidating. You had a couple big moves. One of the big moves basically came after hours, where once again, I love that there's been no progress made on anything with talks, with actual talks and actual negotiations with China on the tariffs. But it's like the market keeps like hinting, or these talking heads keep hinting at, maybe there's a possibility if in a few weeks we may begin to talk about starting a potential conversation about negotiating the tariffs. Like, that's kind of the weird verbiage. Like, there's not anything definitive, yet we keep just being absolute bid off any of those headlines that show any sort of conversations actually potentially starting. So that's what a lot of this, at least what started this bigger move. I think it was Thursday after hours. And it's really hard to trade that, because you have those moments where we are just kind of chopping, consolidating, and then you get the headline risk, and now we're trading in a new range. So until something changes, I mean, like I said, it could be FOMC on Wednesday, but looking at last week's range, I mean, I am in very much a dip buying mode, like looking for intraday longs more than anything else, unless we can start actually falling towards the bottom edge of last week's range. My weekly pivot that I just use for myself to keep myself honest and keep me out of trying to fade potential moves at times, not necessarily a key level, but I'm putting it right at last month's value area high. So if we fall back into April's range, then there's a good chance we probably go retest the very least 5500s, the top of the good time to buy candle over here. And from there, it's kind of like another decision point for the market, in my opinion. Do we then fall back into that range and start, consolidating, chopping around again? Maybe if there's a bad news coming out of FOMC, or Powell potentially comes in hawkish and talks down the amount of rate cuts the market's going to expect this week. Who knows? But there's a few things that could absolutely push us back into that range. So I'm just kind of keeping myself honest, where if we come down here, I'm at least on the first attempt probably looking for buyers to step in and defend the top edge of April's value area high. So, and I think psychologically that 5550s to 5500s on SPX is just a big psychological level for the market. So I could see us potentially returning down there, but I'm more than likely looking to buy at least the first attempt at falling back into that range. So to the upside. So that's what I'm leaning. If we start getting any sort of weakness, or Powell potentially pushes us down the elevator, that's where things might get a little interesting. But if not, if you remember last Sunday, we talked about this being another kind of inflection point decision for the market back into these kind of 5700s to basically 58, let's call it 5820s, 5830s even, for the market to really show me some signs of life. But more than likely, how I'm reading this is we may just kind of chop and consolidate. Like I said, we might and probably will go up and touch these 5800s if there's not any headline risk. But I also, in the weird part in the back of my mind, I guess, I'm thinking about the the logic of how many green days we've had in a row, and is there a possibility we may, sell down the early part of this week? I have absolutely no idea, but I do expect us to at least come back down and retest. What is that? 5650s in that general area, kind of retesting the midsection, or excuse me, last week's value area high as well, for us to potentially push out and head up towards some of these higher levels. I think a lot of people, a lot of talking heads, a lot of everyone's favorite people on FinX or FinTwit, whatever you want to call it. I think a lot of people are looking for the market to return up here towards the 5850s kind of area, this value area going back several weeks into the early part of March. But an area I'd have marked is going to be the Liberation Day high, where we sold off in the after hours when Trump brought out that lovely sign with all of the different tariffs for every single country out there. And that started the large move down. So for me, that's going to be an area that I want to see, what does the market actually do when price gets up there? So 5770s, basically. Like, do we get any sort of reaction? Do we see longer time frame sellers potentially stepping back into this market? I don't know. In the early parts of this week, like I said earlier, with an FOMC on deck, I'm going to be a little light. I'm going to keep things relatively calm because I just expect chop consolidation, maybe retesting some of these mid areas from last week before we really do a whole lot. I've been wrong many times before, but it's hard for me to have any sort of discernible edge with kind of where we're trading and this kind of slow just drift up that we've continued to be on. I'm not necessarily sold, but I'm also not bearish in the slightest. I'm really just looking for continuation higher, but I would love to see some of this kind of retested before I do start really getting into some other positions long outside of intraday scalps. So that's the read on ES. Like I said, for me, I would love a chance to potentially buy this towards the 5570s. I may not get that chance. I think it was Thursday. I was talking to trading buddies. I'm like, all I'm looking for out of this session on Thursday was a chance to get long around 5600 SPX, so basically 5620 on ES, and that didn't come until like the last few minutes of the trading day on Thursday. I think we made an attempt in the early part of the session, and then it was just bid out, and then finally we got that flush towards the end of the day, and then another China headline came out, and we moved right out of that. So I would love a chance to once again get long down in that area to go retest some of these levels. And it seems I'm getting feedback on my mic, I just realized. That's because I had the actual YouTube chat sound playing. So that's my fault. It's good now. So we got about 2 minutes to the open here. Before I dive into NQ, I'd actually like to see that. So if you didn't get your predictions in for the open, get them into the chat now. And actually, I do want to make sure this loads too. I realized I didn't load my execution chart, so let's get that going. Hopefully that loads. If not, we'll watch it on a longer time frame chart. So yeah, as I said, going into this open, I'm expecting it to be relatively flat around settlement, but we'll see. I didn't see any crazy headlines. I don't know if I'm completely misreading everything I saw this weekend, but it seems like it was pretty quiet with all the other crazy headlines we've had over the last few weeks, last few Sundays, where we've had massive gap ups, gap downs. Well, mostly gap downs, but it's been super quiet. So I don't expect a whole lot to potentially push us up or down the rabbit hole. We'll have to wait and see. So coming into about a minute here. Yeah, NQ still closed around 200s, but let me know your thoughts in the chat, everybody, on how this is going to open. So, small gap down, very, very small. My execution chart load. It did not. We'll get that to load so we can actually see this too. But very, very slight gap down, roughly about 10 points from settlement on ES and about 20 on NQ. So pretty lackluster, but still a gap down. Still something to potentially for the market to go fill. Oh God. There it goes. All right. So I got my things are recalculating because it needed to reload the data. So we'll take a hot second here. And it looks like the gap downs, gap up was the chat favorite. So gap down, everybody who said gap down did win, and we are still moving a little bit lower. Let's see if these actually want to load. So while I'm waiting for my data to repopulate in here in NinjaTrader, I want to hear from you guys. What is everyone's expectation for FOMC? What do you guys think we're going to see out of our favorite Fed speakers later this week as the blackout period does end towards the end of this week? And if you missed their book tour, you guys are in for an absolute treat on Friday. If you love Fed speak, you get so much of it. You're going to be real sick of it real quickly. And my charts are still loading. Bear with me, guys. Probably should have just ignored it and not focused on my execution chart. But hey, we're still learning. We're still learning how to do this and make sure everything loads and is running properly for the stream. So that's on me. But we'll give this a hot second. Yeah, my thoughts too are, I mean, they're going to stay the course. I don't expect them to cut. I think they're still going to pause. But I'm very curious to hear his verbiage during the presser, specifically around the pace of cuts going forward for the rest of this year. My guess is, I mean, with all of the uncertainty with the, the tariffs and everything else going on, I mean, why would they cut and forecast a good amount of cuts for this year? I just don't see it yet, but I could be wrong. I'm not a big macro guy, but that's about as macro as I can get. But that's my thoughts. All right, so we are loaded. So let's jump to NQ. So NQ, very similar move to ES, very much correlated. Basically, it was the exact same price action going into this week. My plan still is relatively the same, except the one thing to note is we did push above the Liberation Day highs around 20,000. What is that? 20,050, basically. No. Yes, 20,047, let's call it. So yeah, basically 20,050. We'll just call it that. And since we are trading above that area, like I said, it gives me a reason to want to not necessarily just fade this move. But for the most part, with where we are trading, with how bullish it's been, I am looking once again, like I said in ES, I'm looking to buy this. I really am. But I want to see us push above, basically, if we can hold above 250s, then I like NQ going up to target kind of the 420s to the 550s, at least in the early parts of this week. After that, it gets a little spicy and we probably do head up towards 800s. But for the most part, I want to see what happens when we return to kind of that post initial reaction off the, I guess, February OPEX, when we just started this meteoric move to the downside. And this is where everyone was calling bottom, and then we reoffered, slightly higher than that. But the 400s is an area I'm very curious to just kind of see what happens. See if anybody big is still there, still wants to push us back down. We do still have, in the back of my mind, we still have this stupid gap down here towards 18,500s. That's still just driving me insane. I hate futures gaps for the most part, but what I want to see, or how I would read this, is in the early parts of this week, do we get a dip below 20,000s again? And if we do, I'm looking to potentially, actually, and then I'm looking at this, I don't know if I want to I would long it there, but for the most part, I mean, looking at this, I could very much see, do we get any sort of volume build to come back in towards these 19,800s, perhaps even as far as the 19,700s? Basically that would be, I guess, the same area on ES. Yeah, back towards the April value area high. So that also makes a lot of sense. But for the most part, the plan is going to be relatively the same on NQ. I'm looking to get long and see what happens if we return towards this consolidation towards the early part of this week that we violently pushed out of. I would expect buyers to once again come in around the 600s and defend this area. It is the bottom edge of that old consolidation going back to the early parts of March. And I could see that once again being defended. So I'm personally looking to get long in this area, depending on the reaction of what happens, how we get down there. If it's during FOMC, absolutely not. I'm not knife catching that. But for the most part, it's really, really hard to want to fade this. I'm not necessarily overly bullish, but I'm not trying to really sell this down right now, at least not in this area. I would very much reoffer if I found sellers back up between that 400s to 550s area, 520, excuse me. Yeah, 520s, 530s. But yeah, looking at this, looking at how violently bullish to the upside we've been in the last few sessions, it's so hard to want to fade this, guys. Sorry, I'm trying to see. Let's see. That is 27,300s. Yeah. So for the most part, like I said, I'm looking for that upper side of this old range to potentially still act as resistance in the early parts of this week. But given FOMC, like I said, not a whole lot I'm looking to get too crazy with in the first couple sessions, Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday, we'll see. I got to trade it during power hour, so that should be a whole lot of fun. Oh, this is a 1 hour chart. Sorry, I thought I said that earlier in the session, but I'm basically what you're looking at on all of my prep charts is going to be a 1 hour candle time frame with a weekly volume profile that's just going to continue to stack so that we can kind of find these balance areas. And you'll see these little blue areas are the value area highs and value area lows. So it's just something that I use to kind of guide my trading week to week. Tells me if I'm on the right side of balance. Am I fading something that makes absolutely no sense, or am I actively trading in an area that makes sense to buy it, to sell it, to watch for buyers or sellers to potentially defend? So since I'm such a volume and delta driven trader, that's a lot of the time how I kind of guide my prep. I look for high volume nodes, low volume edges, areas to potentially act as support and resistance where I might find buyers to potentially step in, or an area I may not want to initiate just based on it being basically a point of control on a longer time frame, or a very minimum. There's been almost no volume traded there, so that's an area I could potentially see if we were moving higher and we're coming into potentially an area like a low volume node. Is that an area that sellers are going to possibly reoffer and then wait to see some sort of confirmation of that with things like order flow? So that's a lot of time how I use these charts, is just to guide longer time frame, higher time frame levels and potential decision points in the market. So I use it on a 1 hour and a 4 hour to really kind of dissect my week and have a rough plan going into it. So far, pretty lackluster, excuse me, pretty lackluster open on ES and NQ, or at least our major indices to start the Sunday open. So we'll take a quick peek at CL and GC, which honest to God may be a potential better trade in the early parts of this week. I think gold made me move it and potentially move it to the downside, but we'll see. And crude potentially sitting at an area that it could possibly make sense on a longer time frame to get long towards the lower side of this auto plot balance range that was printed. So one of the many indicators of OFL, but one of them happens to be basically a balance range that can auto default or auto plot onto your charts like this. But it was giving me the same thing that I manually just did inside of my charts as well. So this 5530s really, I think, was the area I was looking, or I had a horizontal line drawn on my other chart that basically was kind of telling me, or was giving me like a value area low for not a value area low, but was it the value area low? Now I'm totally second guessing my other chart. No, I guess it wasn't. Maybe it was last month's low, something like that. But basically down here towards the 55.30s. Yeah, so it printed at 55.40. So we'll call it roughly the same area that I was eyeballing. But was basically the bottom edge of what I would call this balance range that potentially could make sense to long for a trip back up here towards 58s, which happens to actually be the where we actually opened. No, sorry, it wasn't 58s. It was, sorry, looking at another chart. Roughly 58.30. So we'll call it that. But was basically saying, did it make sense to potentially say that this area could be defended down here towards 55.30s for a long, the bottom edge of this balance range for a trip back up to an area of higher volume, which would be roughly that 58.50s to, let's call it 58s even. So that's one thing I'm watching in the early parts of this week and into tonight is so far, it looks like we are going to hold that old buy down here towards 55.30s. And potentially I would be looking for this to traverse at least to an area of higher volume. So somewhere between that 58s to 58.50s would make sense. If you got long down here, I would potentially be looking to cover most of this trade and be in runners potentially down there. But I'm looking for this long to potentially hold in crude. This area down here towards the lower 55s, I'm looking to potentially act as support, at least for right now, to get long, like I said, towards the middle side of this balance range, potentially return us back into these areas of last week down towards maybe even 59s, as high as that, to get back into the lower side of this old balance range, as well as back up into majority of last week's range. But yeah, you know what's funny? I don't know if I have all of the historical data. I don't, because it only goes back to January with how I have this set up right now. But I was kind of coming into Sunday, or I guess coming into this week and looking back, I was just thinking like, even last Sunday, I think I was talking about we were at the bottom edge of the older balance range going back like historically and even into the latter half of last year. Kind of in the bottom of it is like 65s to 70s basically. And I was thinking long there. So happened to get absolutely walloped by the crude price action in the early part of this week. So hopefully buyers are sustaining this and crude doesn't start a just historic run from like 83s down towards who only knows. I'm still one of those traders that was not actively trading futures during COVID and didn't know something could go, or commodity could actually go negative. Had no idea until then. And that was once again reaffirmed when I studied and passed my Series 3 exam. But it's still absolutely crazy when you think about that a actual product can actually go negative as well when you factor in things like delivery costs and others into the actual physical commodity too. But it just is crazy. I hope we're starting to see at least some semblance of a bottom forming after the new administration's drill baby drill narrative just started sending us violently to the downside. So I am one of those people that's just hoping for crude to finally find its footing and at least maybe go retest some of these areas to the upside. So given this is kind of the April low, and so far we're kind of holding off at least from like a longer time frame, the bottom edge of where we have found some support for buyers going back to that when we did make that low, I'd feel comfortable at least taking the stab at the bottom edge of this balance range long for maybe a trip back up to some higher prices or this point of control for the last 5 days back up here towards 58.20s. But hard to be long crude. It just seems like every time I think, okay, the bottom's in, we've reestablished support. A couple weeks later, it just violently makes a new low. So super hard to get too crazy with it. But I like it. I think it's a decent chance that we may rotate back towards a higher area of volume. Yeah, crude going negative still shocks me. But I guess in theory, when you factor almost like no demand for a lot of the actual I guess physical uses of the commodity itself. I mean, who knows? It's not my purview, but it still was wild to actually see. And it's one of those where you kind of have to laugh, and you see people like on Reddit talking about like, okay, how can I take physical delivery of barrels of crude oil because it's not going to be negative forever. So one of those times I guess you'll never forget as a trader, but still makes me laugh to this day when that actually happened. But hey, something else to keep in the back of my head always. But like I said, I like support here. I like this potentially for long. I mean, it's going to make me eat my words. It's just the way that crude always seems to do it. Ever since I started covering crude, going back like last August, and we were literally stuck between, I think, 67 and 70 for 3 months straight. I just have hope that it's going to now get back into some semblance of trading in balance, and it just hasn't for weeks. So hopefully this is potentially a start to a bottom, even though we just gapped down. But I like where we stopped and are now starting to slowly reverse. Leo, you want to trade crude this week? Maybe we should. maybe we'll throw up the crude chart on tomorrow's close. I don't know. I'm optimistic. I mean, come on. It's FOMC week. That's, I don't know why I struggled to say that there, but I weirdly feel like it may trade better than the indices in the early parts of this week until Wednesday, but I could be proven wrong very quickly. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe we'll just get one direction. It's just one of those things I can just close my eyes and buy crude, and it's just going to keep moving up. Just like if you were short GC from 3,500s, you're having a hell of a time, because it pretty much, since making this insane move past the old all-time high, every week it's just continued to make a new all-time high, and everyone was buying. It's our favorite the new old metal, that is gold. But it's starting to get potentially a little violent to the downside. Are we finally going to retest some of these supports at 3,100, 3,000 even? If you missed last Sunday, my historic fumble of a swing long in gold from 2,500, 2550s going back to November 15th. Nick will never forget the date because it happens to be the birth of my child. But ever since then, gold has just been on an insane rally to the upside. And it's been hard to have any luck shorting this outside of maybe an intraday move here and there. And ever since the early parts of April, right around, I guess, Liberation Day, the fear trade into gold has been on. And we've just been up and up and up to the right. Hard to fade it. But now with equities being bid, and I'm seeing tech just have insane inflows, is this potentially the near-term high in gold? I don't know, but I don't think it makes a whole lot. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to just keep buying it and hoping for just continued insane momentum to the upside. Eventually, I think that that fear trade, or there was going to be some aspect of profit taking. So now it looks like that 34s, that 3770s is going to act as resistance for the time being. We had a lot of consolidation up here, and continuing to see, it looks like people either, reoffering or sellers taking profit in those areas and just kind of getting out of the trade. So from here, I mean, it's a little shaky with support, honestly, until we get back towards 3100s. So if we were to lose, I would say, what is that? Yeah, kind of the bottom edge of where we took off and made that meteoric run to 3,500s. But call it the 32s, maybe 32 even, would be like your last line in the sand. I probably wouldn't even try an attempt at a long below 3230s, just because I would expect it to go retest 3200s. But that was last week's low, at least for the time being. That may act as support, just a big round psychological number to make Leo happy. Maybe we'll trade some gold this week. Who knows? Maybe we'll get a little weird for trade the close. Probably not, though. We tend to just stick to our guns with ES and NQ, but I don't know. We'll see how this week unfolds. If we're stuck in a tight balance range in ES or NQ. We're just, chopping around. I think like a lot of how Friday's price action was. I mean, I may be dipping into some of the other products out there because it's one of those things I need to continue to get better at, which is just having, I need to have hungry eyes for, I think, some other products every once in a while, so I don't get frustrated staring at the indices on a day like Friday when we're just not moving, and then you're just kind of waiting for something to happen, and then you don't pull the trigger when we actually do get the move, like we did towards. I think we had that nice little flush towards the close, but it was just chopping, and NQ was just holding 20,200s for hours and hours and hours, and it was driving me insane. Nick, can you sing Hungry Eyes? So you're the singer, you're the musician, but this morning, Stowe knows I'm coming for him as the streamer slash bread aficionado of the influencer world, because I made some absolute insane banana bread this morning. So I'm coming for Stowe's title as, I guess, the king bread streamer out here in the space.
Can you take me higher?
There it is.
Oh boy.
I love that. Even on Nick's low rent Sunday stream, we still have the absolute insane production behind the scenes to make our lovely soundboard of our traders possible. So that is just great. But yeah, with gold itself, I'm just looking potentially, I mean, unless we get an absolute sell in equities, unless Powell just scares the crud out of all of us on Wednesday, I would expect us to still be maybe discovering some prices a little lower in gold. It's just, I mean, I'm looking at this absolute blow off top, and now, you had some consolidation. Now you have another move lower. Like I said, if you kind of lose this 3,200 support, I would expect us to come down here towards, the 3130s, kind of retesting some of this old volume. But even there, when we made that old all-time high at 32s, or I think we front ran it. No, we did hit it. And then reoffered all the way back down towards and below 3000s. I mean, it's equally possible. If we were to lose 32s, we very much could just violently get back to an area where we did find a lot of supply of buyers. So I'm still leaning a little bearish in GC. I just didn't love buying it up here without any sort of, real pullback to kind of retest some of these breakouts. I guess that's just the type of trader I am. You have these lovely boxes provided by OFL that'll tell us some RTH gaps that still potentially need to be filled as well. So we'll see if we can go retest some of these, but like I said, I'd be looking potentially to reoffer it. Let's see if we come back up maybe towards 3270s to potentially find a decent sell. But if we were to lose 32s, I expect us to at least rotate down towards April's value area low at 3150s. But I'd be looking a little lower personally. Are we getting an argument in the chat about is banana bread a bread or a dessert? Is that what you're saying? Is it a cake? I don't know, chat. What do you think? Does banana bread even qualify as me baking bread today? I don't know. I might kind of agree. I put a ton of chocolate chips in it, so it's really a dessert bread. It may be more of a cake. You guys might be right. It might be more of a cake. That's fair. That is fair, but it was delicious. But you know what? I did spend my morning during nap time for my daughter baking some delicious banana bread that I'm looking forward to having, maybe with the scoop of ice cream now, since apparently it's cake. Yes. So there were a ton of chocolate chips in that banana bread. My wife requested more. I dumped in the first cup of chocolate chips and she demanded more. So I had to fulfill her wishes. It's like cinnamon bread doesn't make sense as a bread. I mean, fair. I'll just leave it. It leans more to cake than it does bread. We're going to leave it there and keep moving on here. So to recap gold one more time, I want to fade this. I just think, if the fear trade is not back on, if we continue to move higher in equities, I think gold continues to see some passive selling. back into maybe some more supply down here towards the 3,000s. But it probably is a multi-week journey. For the most part, I would love a sell below 32s to potentially ride toward 3150s. We'll look at that. Thank you guys for coming to today's bread stream. All right. So, had some feedback that this was hard to read last Sunday. So I have enhanced it to enlarge everything and anything that will be on this economic calendar for you guys. Hopefully that reads well and you guys can see this. Much better, I hope. Seems like I can read on the YouTube chat, so I'm assuming everyone is good. So, as far as economic releases on the calendar for this week, I mean, we all know the biggest elephant in the room, but for the most part, the other gotcha tomorrow is going to be the S&P Composite PMI as well as ISM Services PMI shortly after the bell. Both are those terrible time windows that I absolutely hate, which is 15 minutes after the open. So if you're someone like me that likes to let things kind of settle down, at least let things kind of develop, let the opening range potentially establish, and then you got to sit and wait for the lackluster reaction and still going, still the algo is going to stop you out of a trade. So Nick may not take a trade tomorrow morning until shortly after 9 o'clock, even if I do then. I always just hate when they're shortly after the bell. It just drives me insane. But we do have those. They not necessarily are going to move the market an insane amount, but they will likely, if you're on the wrong side of potentially the initial kind of algo spasm when those are released, it still may stop you out of a trade. So for the most part, I will be flat probably until at least the first 30 minutes is established. But outside of that, you do have a 6-month auction at 10:30 Central Time. But the biggest event, even Tuesday, outside of the 10-year auction, it's a pretty quiet day. So not a whole lot going in. Obviously, we do a balance of trade, imports, exports, but nothing that really actually moves the market a whole lot. The 10-year could. It did slowly continue to creep up, or yields did on Friday. So just something I'm continuing to watch. It's one of those, once again, I don't usually trade around lunchtime at 12 o'clock Central, but if I happen to be in a trade, that's one I just don't love still holding. Maybe I'm in a runner or so, but the 10-year, for some reason, always still provides a decent reaction once those results are out. And if you haven't been paying attention, the 12 p.m. time doesn't necessarily matter. It's usually like 12:02 when the results actually come out, that then you kind of get the response by the algos out there. So, but the elephant in the room, the reason everyone is going to be, I guess, or the reason everyone's going to be paying attention to trade the close on Wednesday is not necessarily Jerome Powell's press conference. It's to watch us trade the reaction to it. No. At 1 o'clock Central Time, we will have the Fed's rate decision. As I said earlier, I don't expect them to do anything outside of hold firm for the time being, but the presser should give us at least some guidance on their dot plot going forward as far as the number of cuts for the rest of this year, how Powell responds to questions regarding tariffs and everything else they're probably going to ask him about. Trump wanting to replace him and all the other fun stuff that's just been headlines here and there. I would expect maybe he walks back some of the expectations of the market, the amount of cuts and how Trump's asking and saying the Fed should have already cut at this point and they're late and all the other fun stuff. So I don't know. The press conference always provides a lot of trading opportunities, except apparently the last one. I think Leo and I were on during last FOMC. It was one of the saddest FOMCs in recent memory. If you're a trader that at least may not be trading it with a ton of capital at risk, but if you're looking for opportunities and you at least like to watch the fireworks and have some popcorn to just see the stupidity sometimes that we see in the reaction from equities, last time was a little sad. We didn't move a whole lot. So hopefully this one provides a much greater opportunity for traders to potentially make some money. Hopefully everyone trades it safe. That's always my advice. Don't trade it is my first piece of advice. Second piece of advice would, if you really want to feel alive and you really want to trade it, you better be using micros. So we will have that. You will have us live trading during this, as well as the aftermath when it's shortly over. So we should have some fun on Wednesday afternoon trading that presser. Maybe we'll find a way to pipe in the sound if we can, so we can actually hear what's going on behind the scenes too, but we'll see. And then on Thursday, we do have initial jobless claims and a 30-year auction. Really the two bigger ones. Yeah, am I misreading that? No, we had NFP on Friday of last week. I don't know why I read that as like, in my brain went to this saying non-farm payrolls instead of productivity. So jobless claims and continuing jobless claims on Thursday. And then I know I teased it, but Friday, the Fed blackout period ends, and it ends with a bang, as I think the entire governing body of the Federal Reserve is apparently talking. We have Williams, we have Barr, we have Kugler, Goolsbee, Waller, Williams, Cook, Hammock, and Mausoleum. So everybody is going to be giving some remarks for this week. So yeah, if you love trading Fed volatility, Friday is going to be a great day for you. I never love when they do this, because it just, one statement can stop you out of a trade out of nowhere. So be careful at all times, at least in the morning on Friday. We have, like I said, you have Williams in the pre-market, Barr in the pre-market, and then Kugler, Goolsbee, and Waller and Williams all during RTH. So should provide a lot of opportunities for us. Leo is going to be starting his book tour apparently as well, joining the Fed on their talking tour.
Leo the diplomat?
Yes, Leo the diplomat will be apparently talking this week too. Actually, isn't he? He will be obviously trading the close. I can't remember what day he's actually going to be trading the open with us on NT Live as well. I think that's coming up. But yeah, a lot of Fed speak, a lot of chaos this week, mostly driven by the Fed's rate decision on Wednesday. But should be a lot of fun. Outside of really FOMC, it's a calmer week as far as economic releases. So hopefully will give us some safer trading opportunities. But a lot of the times during this week, as I said, it just tends to kind of just be waiting for FOMC. So I would expect balance and chop and maybe some slight retesting of some areas of last week's volume as well. I don't think we're just going to break out and start moving higher, but I've been proved wrong many times before. So far during this open has been relatively lackluster. I don't know why my execution chart is not loading. I was hopefully going to show that. I don't know. I'll fix that. It might just be because I just don't have it loading correctly. No idea. But we are still slightly moving down so far to start this Sunday. The gap is still open on ES at the very least. I'm not going to hit F5 because I don't want all of my charts to then have to recalculate. It just has to load all of this volume, unfortunately. So it takes a few minutes for me to, the way I have this set up for the Sunday show is not the most economic way for data to flow in, because I have all this data for those 4 products sitting here with all of this volume. And I don't want to then have to let you guys sit here and watch me wait for it to stop spinning. So we're going to leave it there. But yeah, it'll be fixed. But unfortunately, yeah, we can't see my Delta chart and see how this is actually moving. But so far we are moving relatively lower, but yes, about 20 points off the settlement price. So we'll jump into some questions. As I'm going through everything here tonight, if there's anything you guys want to ask or have me go over a little deeper, I am absolutely happy to. So feel free to start throwing some questions into the chat if you do have any. I did see one that was up there that made me laugh. Let me find it. Where is it? There was one asking if I was an Angels fan, probably because of my hat. So yes, I am a sad Angels fan with the largest drought in the majors for the playoffs. So yeah, that's my life. There was another one. Leo, yes, it is not safe to trade this week. Just FYI, it's FOMC week. It's not safe. No, Nick, I've missed you on Top Step. How is it being a full-time trader? It's an absolute grind, is the first thing I say. I mean, I still have days, weeks, guys, where I question, is this what I want to do? Making my living, supporting a baby, and my wife staying at home. It's just not always the most fun. It's a weird dynamic when you really are doing this full time, when you have to, I was always in a business development and sales mindset. It's the household I was kind of raised for a long time. So eating what you kill has always been kind of ingrained in my DNA, but doing it like this, I always was like a half decent trader when I did it casually. I was very much long only in the early parts of my, corporate career. Didn't really actually day trade anything, not until kind of the Fed cycle of the end of 2018 that I start kind of actively watching the markets more in and day out and actually doing things, actually trading stocks. I was still very much like long only, but then you get exposure into some of the other products that are out there and how to trade them. And it kind of never looked back, basically once COVID started and the markets were really moving. So it's tough every day to do this. And I've really evolved over the last couple of years. I mean, I've been doing this officially full-time still for only like 18 months, but I've been doing this truly to pay my bills and survive. I mean, I was laid off from big tech. What is it? It is now May. So a little over 2 years ago. And I basically, the only income outside of a severance was trading ever since then. So it's the only way I've kind of known to survive, but it really is a grind. So if you were a half decent trader and you have other income to supplement it, it's a whole nother side of the mental game that I think takes a lot of time. Something I'm still constantly balancing and figuring out. It's those mindsets of that I'm still kind of in this cycle where I'm trading smaller. I'm not trading a whole lot right now in my personal and other accounts. It's just, I'm keeping it light. I'm in a slight drawdown, or April I wasn't even in it. I still was green for the whole month, but it was like a weird couple weeks where I was kind of like, I had a few DLL days back to back, and I was just like taking a step back, trying to reaffirm, get some confidence back into the way I was trading. And that's another development, I guess, in this full-time journey that I haven't really gone through, which is I don't need to trade every single day. I don't have to put money at risk a $0 day across the board is better to me than a red day, because whether it's I'm just not feeling it, I don't have confidence in myself for what I'm doing. So it's like sometimes you just take a couple days, you take a week, whatever, just take a step back. You can still monitor the markets, but you don't have to necessarily put things at risk. So I'd kind of been doing that, not the last week, but like 2 weeks ago. That's kind of what I was doing. I just was taking a step back and kind of reflecting and trying to work my mental side out of it. So you have to kind of do those things too. But for the most part, I mean, I don't recommend going full-time to anybody. It was never my choice. It kind of happened. I kind of had to do it to survive, and something kind of clicked. I started doing it in front of people. People seemed to somewhat enjoy my stupidity in front of a camera. So naturally it allowed me to continue to do this and have a little success like I've had in the last couple of years. And it actually then replaced a 9-to-5 income. So here I am. So it's just tough. It really is. It's a grind. It's hard to really be in this mindset of, I guess it may have been different when I know like Crudele and some of the other guys like that were in the pits and doing this day in and day out. That's a little different, I guess. And I guess when you think of it as like a full-time thing, even though you're trading your own money and you're still eating what you kill and doing the same thing, but that's one of the good reasons or why I'm, I guess, still streaming and still, I guess, going on this journey, that I'm still learning how to become an effective trader day in and day out with you guys. But doing this with people like Leo, with like Stowe, like XY, and we're, your trading buddies that you have, it almost feels like like the water cooler of a 9 to 5, where you're actually doing this with people. There's people that are supportive and helpful, and that you can constantly kind of, balance yourself out with this game. It's something that I think is 100% necessary as well. It'd be really hard to do this in a weird way full time if I was just another anonymous person out there in the space alone. Like it can just get very like sad and dark, I guess, if you're kind of, in your tiny hole in a dark room just with charts and trading. I know that works for a lot of people, but I guess for my personality, it wouldn't. So I'm thankful to kind of not necessarily have, not only to have, I guess, friends, but an audience to kind of witness and be a part of this journey that I'm kind of on. So I know that was a very long-winded answer to what's it like being a full-time trader, but I mean, that was I think a different answer that I could have possibly given that I haven't necessarily talked about before. So hopefully that is helpful, but it's a grind, guys. There's no question. There's a lot of highs, there's a lot of lows, and the highs are high, very high, and the lows are very low. So it's tough. I've just tried to kind of rein myself in. I was talking to, just offline to the XY about it last week. Even we were just talking back and forth about it, but I'm at my best when I am truly taking a base hit. And for me, that could be $1,000, whatever it is, locking up my computer, calling it a session, and doing something else. When I am continuing to try to, I guess, swing much larger and rather than taking base hits is where not necessarily I get myself in trouble, but then those highs and lows, that bell curve of highs and lows gets real wide versus me being very consistent, which if you've ever seen me trade historically, in front of a camera, I'm very much, hey, I'll hit one trade and you may not see me take another setup the rest of the day. Whether I may call them out, but I may not take another trade, because for me, taking down some, having a green day is equally important just for my personality and just the way that I execute it. It's how I've been successful for the last 2 years. It's how I'm still doing this. Me taking those base hit type days, locking it up, and literally doing anything else, working out, spending time with my family, being outside. It's those things keep me very very grounded in this and keep me just doing what I need to do every single day. It's almost like it comes in and that's my task. That's my goal. I have something I can attain. I do it. That's good enough. And it keeps me surviving for the next session. Yeah. Base hits. I really think you'll see everything on Twitter. You'll see a lot of people with massive P&Ls and making a lot more money than I did. And it's easy to start just comparing and trying to do these things, but it's just not my game. I just learned that about myself for the last 2 years. It's just, I'm very much in a mindset of, hey, take the base hit, move forward on to the next session, versus when I start really trying to like hit a home run and swing it big is where I just, I may hit it, but then the next day I'm suddenly thinking I'm God's gift to trading. And then I get humbled real quick in this game. So yeah, if there's no questions, guys, we can do a quick recap of ES and then we'll let you all out of here. So looking at FOMC week, as I had kind of said in the early parts of tonight's session, one of the things I'm looking for is potentially looking to see what happens if we do get any sort of weakness in the early parts of this week. I am looking to be a buyer somewhere between SPX 6000 and basically 5550s, basically last month or April's value area high. I want to see if this little consolidation we were into the later parts of 2 weeks ago and the early part of this week, does it still act as support? Do we still find buyers stepping in and kind of buying at these levels? And if we do, I want to be a part of it. So my pivot's there for the week. I'd love to be long off this value area high from April to potentially make a trip, if we do get continuation, up towards the 5800s. So I'm expecting some aspect of this volume to be retested in the early parts of this week, or maybe FOMC, but I would expect some consolidation and chop in this area if we do return to it. But it's one of those where I'm kind of just betting outside of if Powell just chooses violence on Wednesday, which he never does. So I highly, except for December of last year, but I want to kind of be potentially buying in this spot, which is the bottom edge of the old bottom from everybody on Twitter as well. So just some confluence there with April's value area high and that old low from the previous bottom that everyone called. So I may want to be a buyer there and looking for that potentially to return up to 5,800s in the coming weeks. But I would expect some aspect of this volume to be retraced. If for some reason Powell does choose violence and walks back every rate cut until we get direction on the tariffs in China and everything else, then another area to watch. Outside of the good time to buy high at 55, basically 5,500s on SPX is probably where you'd find everybody stepping in, but also just watching for this potential gap that's still there down towards the 53s at the absolute horrifying lows that no one's expecting this week as well. So that's kind of my read. That's kind of my plan. I'm going to keep it light in the early part of this week. Yes, Leo, you started your career trading. Yes, I know it's been a very long time, but yeah, it is a product. Some of us do still trade it. Someone like me, someone like AJ, a few others out there in the space. I'm sure there's a lot of people in our chat who may be offended by what you just said. I know I'm offended as a sometimes yes trader, that you don't know what it is. But thank you guys for all tuning in and being here on your Sunday. No, it is not retired. I really appreciate it. If you haven't already, please do hit thumbs up in the chat. Please hit subscribe. If you've enjoyed all of the content that the team at NinjaTrader is putting out here on YouTube, then do hit that like button, do hit subscribe, and please tune in tomorrow morning. The whole team will be back to give you guys some pre-market analysis, see what happened over the overnight during kind of the post-Sunday open, see how things are looking as we are shaping up for the RTH open tomorrow morning. I don't know. I think, is it Tanya? I believe it's Tanya trading. I think she trades Mondays for the open. So please do tune in for the open tomorrow on NT Live. We look forward to having you all here. And thank you guys for hanging out and taking some time out of your Sunday to get some prep in with me. I will see you guys tomorrow afternoon with Mr. ES Leo himself. He still hasn't changed his handle there. So everybody have a good night. Thank you for tuning in. Trade safe. Have fun this week. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Cheers.